What if I told you there was a 5-year-old girl in Baton Rouge who picked up a basketball for the first time and just knew, right then and there, that this was going to be her life? No hesitation, no doubt, just pure certainty. That girl grew up to become one of the most decorated women in the history of the sport, a national champion, a WNBA champion, an Olympic gold medalist, and the first woman to ever have her jersey retired and a statue built in her honor at LSU. Welcome back to Basketball Daily, and today we are diving into the incredible story of Simone Augustus, from a packed gym in Baton Rouge to the top of the WNBA draft and all the way back home again. Simone was only 5 or 6 years old when she first picked up a basketball. Before that, she had tried everything: golf, volleyball, softball, anything with a ball, she was throwing herself into it. But something about basketball hit different. The moment she started shooting around and playing a little competition, she knew. She went home and told her father, "This is my game." And her father, without missing a beat, asked her one simple but powerful question: "Do you want to be good, or do you want to be great?" She said great. And from that day on, the two of them got to work. By the time she reached Capitol High School, Simone was already a legend in the making. She was the #1 recruit in the country, and the community around her exploded with excitement. Gyms were packed beyond capacity. Fire marshals had to step in because there simply was not enough room. People from every background showed up just to watch this young girl play. For the first time, girls' basketball games were the main event, with boys playing before them instead of after. Coaches like Pat Summitt would show up just to watch her. It was a shift in how an entire community viewed the women's game, and Simone was right at the center of it. Unlike a lot of today's recruits who travel the country playing AAU basketball from a young age, Simone's path looked a little different. She started with a local team called the Lady Tigers, and her father eventually formed his own AAU team called the Lady Franklins. Their travel was mostly limited to short drives, Baton Rouge, to New Orleans, maybe Mississippi. It was not until 8th or 9th grade that she left the region entirely, heading to Florida for an AAU national tournament. Her team did not even make it out of pool play, but Simone played so well that a scout for the Blue Star Elite camp noticed her and sent an invitation. That camp changed everything. She traveled to Terre Haute, Indiana, and found herself surrounded by players from Michigan, California, and all over the country, most of whom had never even heard of a player coming out of Louisiana. When they asked if she could actually play, she simply said, "The court is the same size. The goal is the same height. We're going to figure it out today." And figure out she did. That camp performance is what catapulted her from an unranked player into the #1 ranked player in the country almost overnight. After that camp, the letters started pouring in. 10, 11 letters a day, sometimes more, until her mother had storage containers full of recruiting mail. Simone would take her time reading through them, noticing which schools had actually done their homework and which ones sent generic form letters. LSU stood out from the very beginning. They had actually started recruiting her years earlier, back when she was just 8 or 9 years old, competing in a hoop shooting contest. That early attention meant LSU already had a place in her heart long before the recruiting frenzy hit. Her final decision came down to 2 schools, Tennessee and LSU. On paper, Tennessee seemed like the obvious choice, a powerhouse program at the time, the kind of school so many great players before her had chosen. But Simone had grown up coming to watch LSU play in a packed arena, watching them compete against teams like Georgia and Tennessee, and she started to wonder what would happen if a few key pieces came together. Could LSU compete at that elite level too? She decided to find out. It was, in her words, the hardest and yet the easiest decision of her life, because her whole career had always been about hard work and building something extraordinary with the people around her. Her parents, who had shaped so much of her journey, made a point of stepping back and letting her make this decision entirely on her own. The only request was that she personally call the other school out of courtesy once she made up her mind. To this day, her parents still sit in the very same section of the arena they always have, right by the tunnel, so they can catch that same moment every single time she walks out onto the court. When Simone arrived at LSU, the program was right on the edge of something big. The year before she got there, LSU had won the SEC tournament, a sign the program was heading in the right direction. but there were still games with empty seats and curtains covering unused sections of the arena. Even then, she saw the potential in the players already there, women who kept showing up and competing with what she calls that tiger mentality, even without a crowd behind them. Once Simone arrived, everything changed. Season ticket sales skyrocketed, and the program built a legacy that, 20 years later, people still talk about. Over her 4 years at LSU, Simone racked up National Player of the Year honors, multiple Final Four appearances, and became one of the most decorated athletes in school history. She credits those years as the biggest growth phase of her life, both as a person and as an athlete. She had professors who worked closely with her to help her thrive as a student athlete, and coaches who built systems that required real basketball intelligence, systems that mirrored the pro game and prepared her for what was coming next. In 2006, Simone was selected first overall in the WNBA draft by the Minnesota Lynx. She admits she had no idea it was actually going to happen until her name was called. And even then it barely felt real until she landed in Minnesota and reporters started asking her questions about a city she knew almost nothing about. She spent around 15 years of her career building a life there, eventually becoming a true Minnesotan herself, adjusting to the cold winters and, funnily enough, struggling far more with the change in food than with the weather. Simone also spent years playing overseas, first in Istanbul, Turkey, for Galatasaray, and later in Russia for several years, including a stint in a city roughly 8 hours outside of Moscow. She learned to speak Russian and Turkish just to navigate everyday life, learn to drive in foreign countries, and experience basketball cultures unlike anything in the United States, especially the intense rivalry games in Turkey where fans would throw toilet paper onto the court if their team started losing. She describes that first flight overseas, alone, with no family accompanying her, as one of the most emotional moments of her life, breaking down in tears right as the boarding doors closed, before eventually finding her footing and thriving in a completely new world. Simone also had the honor of representing Team USA and winning Olympic gold. That opportunity almost slipped away after she was cut from a few teams in college and nearly gave up on trying out again. It was her LSU coach, Sue Gunter, who personally pulled her aside and convinced her to give it one more shot at a tryout in Colorado Springs. Simone credits that conversation and the encouragement from veteran teammates who taught her the value of contributing beyond just scoring, as a turning point that helped her make the national team and eventually become an Olympic gold medalist. After a legendary playing career, Simone came full circle back to LSU, becoming the first woman to have her jersey retired and the first to have a statue unveiled outside the arena. She admits she still walks by that statue regularly, and the weight of what it represents has never fully settled in. It was not something she expected or sought out. It simply became reality one day when her longtime coach called to tell her the news. These days, Simone is back at LSU once again, this time as an assistant coach on a staff coming off a national championship. She was initially unsure about stepping into coaching, having given so much of herself to the game as a player, but the opportunity found her anyway. She describes her coaching style as calm, communicative, and consistent, someone who talks to her players the same way she talks in everyday life rather than relying on yelling. She is still figuring out exactly who Coach Augustus is, but she is leaning into the process with the same work ethic that carried her through every chapter of her career. When asked what legacy she hopes to leave behind, Simone did not talk about championships or trophies. She talked about bringing people together, creating an atmosphere around the game she loves that feels like a celebration every single night. From a 5-year-old girl in Baton Rouge who knew basketball was her game, to a national champion, a WNBA #1 pick, an Olympic gold medalist, and now a coach shaping the next generation, Simone Augustus' story is a reminder that greatness is built one decision, one relationship, and one hard day of work at a time. That is the story of Simone Augustus, right here on Basketball Daily. If you enjoyed this one, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story we bring you. Drop a comment below and let us know which player or coach you want us to cover next. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.